Thanks everyone for coming. My name is Jeff Casper. Many of you know me. I work at the TAB. Originally, my role was as head of operations and research. So I'm one of the people that was responsible for the visibility study, the eyes-on ratings that came out. So it's my fault. I'm sorry. I'm presenting today with Enza Chiotti, who is from Smart Media. And we're going to talk a lot about all of the stuff we heard on stage and how we're going to integrate all of it into our work going forward. So who can identify with this comic here? Yeah, Enza found that. It was a brilliant, brilliant stroke. I actually met Enza a long time before I met her. When I was working at Media Edge, I used to teach. And I was looking for really good material to be able to tell people, my students who were 22, what media is. What is media planning? And how do you connect media planning to marketing objectives? And I couldn't find anything online anywhere to buttress the textbook. And then I found this document that you had written. And I didn't remember, I couldn't even pronounce her name or anything like that, but it was brilliant, and I used it for years in the classroom because it was so simple and so easy to understand. And then I ended up getting to meet you, which was pretty wild. So if anybody needs somebody like that to come to your offices and just boil it down for you and make it simple for you and help integrate what it is we're talking about into your company specifically, she's good. I can help generally in that, the work I do for the organization. All of you are my boss at the same time. So if I come in and I help one person, somebody else gets disadvantaged, it becomes awkward. So I could, help you with general training, general observations, general help. If you want specifics, that's a good choice to go with Enza. So what are we talking about today? Well, we heard a lot of things on the main stage, and they sound great, right? And what are we going to do about it is really the call to action. We all heard Nancy's list. Connect to digital and mobile. Make sure out-of-home is easier to plan, buy, and measure. Make the most of data like targeting and ROI. Just market more and do more for the public good. That's a great list. I mean, I think I could retire happy if we were able to accomplish all of these things. If you were to do these three things, the other two may follow. And I think what we're going to try to hit on right now is to understand how better to do these top three things before we move on. Some of the conference highlights that I wrote down, you all heard Mr. Burrell. He was specialized in local advertising. He said, the business is not selling advertising, it is serving the needs of local advertisers. Another one, Bill Tucker, I'm paraphrasing here. He says, own what you own together. And I said, well, Bill, what do we own? And he said, you own audience location data. It's yours. You know more about it as a medium than anybody. So own it. Make sure it's yours. Don't try to go too far, but own what it is you own. Know what it is you know. Ian Dallimore in one of the breakout sessions says, and this is talking about programmatic, which is another word that we're going to maybe touch on today. Programmatic is another person selling your inventory, meaning it's a good thing. It's not something to be scared about. It is a local play as well as a national play. So what did he mean by that? Andreas Supliotis was also on the same panel from IUTA, and he said, measurement is not the only standards that need to be set. There is also process, contracts, and terminology. And I couldn't agree more. So these are like broad platitude type statements that really sound great on a main stage. But, okay, now what? I mean, we all agree with this thing. Now what is it we are going to do about it? And we have some ideas, you have some ideas, We don't have all of the ideas, so I'm hoping that we could sort of have some conversation in here and come up with some solutions together and work out what is the next step. These sound good way up here in the sky, but we've got work to do. So before we do that, you know, a lot of people come to me and they've always got problems, they've always got hurdles, they've always got, this is the next challenge we have. And I always try to remind people, look how far you've come. You can do this. It is possible. We've come a long way in a very short time as this organization has rolled out. This was your audit in 2009. 2009. Nancy says 10 years ago we released Eyes On. No, we released Eyes On in 2010. This tie I bought in 2010. You can tell. Yeah, but it, you know, it's a little out of whack, but you know, you get the picture. That wasn't that long ago, and we didn't know a lot of what we know today. It's a completely different environment today than it was just 7 years ago, so we can do this. So when other media were worried about commercial ratings, like should we adopt C3 versus C7 ratings for television, should we have personal or passive people meters to measure other forms of advertising. Different sample size issues were a big deal in different media, and internet media was worried about home and at work and all of these different larger questions. We were sitting here worried about where all our billboards were. We didn't know where they were. We had no infrastructure at the organization, and nobody in the audience really had a large enough infrastructure as you do today to be able to even tell us where your locations were. You knew where they were, but you couldn't tell anybody exactly where they were. And you did all of that. Everybody did all of that work. And then, if that's not bad enough, in 2010, we released the ratings, and then all of a sudden, like, the floodwaters came, and we had to learn all of this terminology at once. Other media, they didn't have to worry about it. It just sort of came, you know, a little bit at a time. But we were in the floodwaters, right? We had to learn what is target audience, what is frequency, what is standard media markets, what is a CBSA, what is a DMA, what are impressions, what are GRPs, what is cost per point. And we had to learn all of this at the same time. And today, even though I still get a question here and there about showings, you've done it. You've learned it. And the conversation is not about showings anymore. It's about ratings and impressions. And that is a huge, huge step. Now, we all have seen this chart any number of times. And the reason I'm putting it up here isn't to say, hey, you know, look how great we're doing. You know, we are versus other traditional media, but there's so much more opportunity for us to do more. Last year, this was presented, and Mark Boydman, who's the managing director of Peter Solomon, said to the whole industry that he sees our industry, which is the only traditional media that's growing, moving from a current $7.3 billion to an $8.4 billion industry if we adopt all of the changes that are going forward. If. Somebody told me the other day, you know, Eyes On Rating was a great success. As a product, it was a great success, but people weren't using it. So how far would it really have gone? And we've learned some lessons there that we want to tell you about as well. This is our share of media spend, 4.4, okay. You know, we could do better here as well, and we want to. But the point I'm trying to make is, when we first released audience ratings, that the prevailing wisdom in the industry was, there's so much demand. Agencies and advertisers were telling us, you need to have impressions, you need to have ratings, you need to have all of the same measures that everybody else needs to have. You just have to have it, and that's why we're not buying you. We would buy you more if you had this. That's what they said. Are there any agencies and advertisers here, by the way? Advertisers, agencies? How about advertisers? Okay, we're going to talk about you. That's what they said. And the prevailing wisdom at TAB at the time was, okay, this is great. If we just release the product the demand will push everything forward. It's like dropping a droplet onto a still pond. Everything else will just happen. Everything else will just happen. We will have people that'll pick up the ball and they will carry our data in their software systems. We will have people out there selling across all the advertisers and agencies. And it'll just happen. It'll happen. Well, we've learned that while a little bit happened, we really need to do a better job pushing it out, right? Doing more marketing on our own, doing more platform work on our own, and making sure that people understand what it is we have. Because they're not pulling enough. We need to do more pushing. So I have a new job at TAB, excuse me, Geopath. I'm getting used to it. I had a T-shirt on the other day, so just kind of remind me, but it's a cool name. And since September, I've been on the road asking a lot of agencies and specialist agencies in particular very specific questions about where we stand with our rating system and how we can improve. So this is what we've learned from our client visits. So I've been around 15 markets, 125 meetings, about 800 people. This isn't counting all the webinars we do, and mostly out-of-home general specialists and general planners. And this is what they told me, general agencies mostly. They are surprised at how good our measurement system is today. I don't really talk a lot about Operation More in these meetings. I want to make sure people understand what it is we have today. And they said, I had no idea your ratings and impressions were this well-founded and this good. And they didn't have, a lot of them didn't have access to the data. They still say they want innovation, in particular audience location data. When I mention like connected cars and smartphones and apps, they say, oh my God, that's the greatest. I got to have it. I got to have it. They also say that they want TAB to remain a baseline measurement service. So just to make sure that when they're comparing across different media types that they have the ability to do that and with one measurement service in place that is comparable. But they also welcome very much innovation from private companies and ideas from private companies. Come to them with an idea. Just make sure it's pinned to the original measurement system. So, and that for me is glorious. I mean, I would love that if people were to take the baseline ratings and make something better out of it. I think that's fantastic. And here's the thing. When I ask them specifically, okay, I have all this data. It's in a server. I can give it to you any which way you want it. Put it next to your ROI systems. Make it part of your day-to-day operations. Just tell me what it is you want, and we will do it. They say, let me get back to you. Some were even very evasive, like, I don't know how much I'm allowed to share. And I said, look, I work for you. You pay dues. I'm here to help you. So that was a little disappointing that they weren't able to, exactly articulate yet what it is they want. So, I kind of come out of these meetings like, ugh. But then I remember, well, this is an opportunity for us. This is an opportunity for us to take the lead and say, this is what you need to do. This is how this medium can help you. We can help them draw up the plans. So, some other observations from these visits is that today, sellers and buyers are trading on ratings mostly, which is good. And there's lots of agreement on the issues. The current ratings, they feel, are under-marketed, and they need more platforms. They need more ability to have access. And this is a big point, many times I've found that people are taking what used to be called showings, a 25 showing, and then they'll say, well, in reality, now it's called 50 GRPs. So wherever it says 25 showing, they'll put in 50 GRPs, and everything else stays the same, which is something we need to change. General planners and advertisers still today remain largely unmotivated on their own to go after out-of-home, unless it's for new business. Then they love us. But here's the thing. I had a guy tell me this directly. He said, I have $100 million in television. I have $4 million in out-of-home. I don't have enough people working here. Where am I going to put my resources? And the answer is not out-of-home. So again, I'm leaving these meetings going, and then I remembered, this is still another opportunity for us. They're not going to pick up and do a lot of this work for us. However, specialists in particular have an opportunity to pick up the ball and say, look, I have a great idea. Let me take care of the numbers for you. This is what you should do. Audience location services will help. How many times have we heard the word Operation More over the last 3 days? 100, 200? Sit in my shoes for a while. This is good stuff. It really is. I mean, this is going to revolutionize the industry and all of that, unless we don't do anything about it. And what I'm here today to tell you is, while this has all kinds of opportunities for us, we still have to take it from up here, bring it here so that we can use it, and then it'll have legs, and then it'll work. It's not going to do it on its own, and we can't rely on other people to do it for us. We, all of us, have to just pick up the ball and do it. So on the adoption curve, we pretty much learned the media language, I would say. I mean, you've been around.
I'd like to actually ask you guys, show of hands, how many of you are familiar with all of those terms that we threw up there? Impressions, GRPs, reach, and frequency, and what they mean and how to use them. So there's still a couple of hands that are not raised. How many of you use them in your daily language when you are talking with clients? Okay. I mean, this is a small group, so I'm glad to see that there's a big enough quantity of people that's doing it. But from my experience, I'm finding that a lot of people aren't still familiar with some of that terminology, that they're not familiar with how to use it. So we are not going to spend time, unfortunately, today, because we don't have the time to do the learn the media language portion of this. I'm not going to do my typical, hey, an impression is the number of exposures, not the number of people. Reach is unique. Frequency is due. I'm not going to go through all of that. There's a lot of resources on the TAB website that's available to you that you should become familiar with. There's e-learning modules, there's workbooks, there's videos. The other thing is, please ask questions. I know it's late and everybody wants to go out in the sunshine, but let's keep it active.
I do have a question. Are you saying that most of the people don't know the definition that applies or sells or both?
I think in the out-of-home space, it's both. In the general agency world, they know this. This is their language.
I started 30-some-odd years ago, and they used to have a handbook that they used to pick out. I think it was TA was a while ago.
Yep.
But I know all the guys that I know, that half of the guys in the room there, like Chris Carr and Mike Miller and all the guys that from Gannett and 3M and Forster and Kleiser, we all knew this terminology, and they had that model, which was that gave you reach and frequency. And
well, there's Mallet that did things for transit.
The Gallup.
And then it was Gallup.
And we had to know that. So I don't know. I'm surprised that you're saying that they don't know the definitions or they don't know the terminology.
You know, sometimes knowing it, just being able to regurgitate the term impressions and being able to tell me, hey, Enza, that's the number of exposures, is very different than truly understanding the concepts behind it. When I look at things like Gallup and Mallet, they were fine for that period of time, but there were so many problems with those models, so many. I always, if any of you has sat through any of the presentations I've ever done, I always tell my story of when I used to get a reach and frequency off of Gallup, and I had a significant amount of money in out-of-home, I would get 102% reach.
The other thing I want to add
That's
to
a problem.
Yeah, it is. But there was nothing wrong with those measures. They were great measures. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. I mean, I used to kick sand in the face of out-of-home before I started in out-of-home, stupidly, because DEC was such an old measure. Well, DEC is properly defined as a daily effective circulation. That's a great measure. It's a great measure. It does exactly what it is it's supposed to do. The issue at hand has been advertisers and agencies say this isn't enough. You know, you can call it whatever you want, but I need ratings that are going to represent a standard market. I need ratings and impressions that are defined against populations that I know what the population should be. I need a reach and frequency system that is part of a system and not something that's always the same market to market. I mean, these are things that we've solved with the original release of the ratings database. Now they're coming back to us and they're saying, well, now I want day parts, and I want seasonal adjustments, and I want maybe hour-by-hour ratings that go up and down so I could figure out whether I'm getting what it is I paid for. And then finally they're saying things like, I want real-time ratings, and that's when I just pick up a chair and I want to throw it, because they don't sometimes know what it is they're asking for. You know, we're not ready as a business to have the ability to understand what to do about real-time ratings. Will we get there? Absolutely, and I hope we do. But there's a lot that this room has to understand and has to help us fix before we are ready to carry something like real-time ratings.
I mean, I think the other piece of it for me is, you know, again, it's not just understanding some of those terms or knowing what the definitions mean, it's about how do you use them. For you as a seller, for those of you that are sellers, how are you going to go into your inventory and pull up impressions and what is it that you're going to look at and analyze to see if you can craft a story? It's not just about taking off the DEC and slapping on a new impression number. Okay, that's still happening out there, believe it or not. I mean, we're definitely seeing much more adoption and usage, but it's still not widespread enough. You know, when you're getting an RFP, if you're working on a national basis and you're getting an RFP and somebody's asking you for 100 weekly GRPs, do you know why they're asking you for 100 weekly GRPs? Or are you just sitting there now trying to figure out, how many units do I need? How many units do I need to fulfill this? It's a great first step, but I feel like we all took that first step and we're kind of stuck right now. So we're only going to show, you know, again, trying to keep this in a shorter format, we're going to show a few examples of what it truly means to start to use some of these numbers to evaluate the inventory that you have, both locally and nationally. That's going to be the critical piece because they are different. Okay, they are two different things. And I get that. You know, I come from a general planning background, and I worked on various accounts from, you know, $100 million when I worked on Procter & Gamble down to some smaller accounts on a localized basis. And you do approach them very differently. So we get that piece of it, so we're going to try to cover it. We'd love to hear back from you guys if you feel like you have case studies or you feel like, you know what, hey, I think you're wrong. You know, we're so happy to hear that. We think you're wrong. We are using it. Here's how we're using it. I think that would be helpful for us to begin to have that conversation and really start to get this moving forward. Because when Operation More hopefully gets approved and gets funded and we go out there, if we can't get this right, how on earth are you going to use Operation More? If you can't use basic impressions to sell your inventory, if you can't use basic impressions to evaluate what you're getting back from an operator, how are you going to use location data? I still can't wrap my head around all of that data that's going to be coming out and how that's going to affect the decisions that I might make.
Right.
Did you hand this over?
Yeah, you can. Right, so let me just do this and then I'll kick it over to you, I guess. We have ratings right now that can cover every piece of the planning and buying platform. And with Operation More, they're going to become even greater, even more numbers. So, you know, whether it's budgeting and allocation all the way through to target planning, buying, and stewarding, a lot of the things that we hear coming back to us is we don't want to make any decisions about out-of-home until we understand how we're going to evaluate how it's doing. And there's many different definitions about ROI. There's the multimedia ROI that big companies do, where they're evaluating out-of-home's contribution next to other media. There's also a case-by-case ROI, which says this many people walked by this board, and therefore they did X, Y, and Z, which Operation More is going to, you know, help us better understand how to do. One of my main thrusts here in my new role is to make sure that these ROI companies that specialize in this type of measurement, because I've worked with these companies for many, many years, understand what it is we have and help them understand how they could take our numbers that we have today and the ones that we're going to have tomorrow and make them part of their measurement system, and they're being very receptive. The other thing I wanted to share with you is exactly how agencies have changed in the last 10 years or so since I've left and come back. One major change that I've found is that the first thing they tell me when I say, "What is your job?" they say, "I'm digital." I say, "Well, what does that mean?" You know, playing dumb. And they say, "Well, we plan digital first, we take care of that first, and then we use other traditional media to support digital." I mean, isn't that amazing? That's fast. I mean, it used to be people would plan television, or maybe they would listen to the client and plan that, and then, but it was always television first. Now it's digital first. So that comes back to Nancy's main point, which is, you know, we really need to bridge the gap between out-of-home and digital as best as we can, because they are thinking of themselves as digital planners first, traditional media planners second. Anyway. So what we want to talk about today a little bit is how to examine our own roles. What is it we all have to do? There's a lot of things that we have to do differently at Geopath, but each group is sort of on the hook to be able to say, we wanted this change, now we have the change, what is it we're going to do differently about it?
So before I actually go to the next slide, I wanted to ask a question. How or what have you been doing over the last couple of years to integrate the TAB out-of-home ratings into the way that you are either selling inventory or evaluating the inventory that you're purchasing? I'm going to make you work. Anybody? Have you been doing? I'm sorry, it's just this way everyone can hear you. I know they're a pain.
This is being recorded, so if you don't want to be heard, just talk real quietly. Okay. But we would appreciate if you have a microphone.
Now, so we buy a plan, like you said, with large national clients, but also all the way down to local clients as well. And what we've taken from the TAB ratings is we really scrub the reach and frequency numbers. And the reach and frequency numbers have vastly affected how we realized, oh, we're underbuying this market, we're overbuying this market. It's allowed us to shift greatly the spend so that we're more effective.
So does everyone understand what that means, like the reach and frequency and evaluating it? Because we throw around the term impressions, and we throw around the term, you know, we're going to be buying and selling audiences, and that translates the easiest way to a raw number of impressions. But reach and frequency, for me, I'm just so happy to hear that, because as a planner and as a communications specialist, when I grew up in the business, yes, it was all about TRPs and what weight level are you buying. But the communication goal became really the key point of what I was trying to do as a planner. When I had my clients' budgets, I didn't want to just buy GRPs because I'm getting this number, but I don't know how many people are actually seeing my program on a unique basis. So the reach really allows you to do that. So I'm actually going to show you a few things. That's a perfect segue into this, actually, so thank you. I couldn't have planned that any better. But is there anything else that anyone wants to say in terms of like what they've been doing over the last couple of years to change the way they've done business? Yeah?
That kind of proves itself. You can prove to them that you're going to invest $4,000 or $5,000, and this is what your return's going to be.
So I'm sorry, so you're saying like the CPM piece of it is becoming more important in the evaluation. And you know, a lot of times when you're dealing with, you know, and again, on a local basis, you're going to have a mix of this, because you're going to have some advertisers who, if they buy other media in the marketplace, whether it's local radio or local broadcast, anything on a local basis, they are still dealing with these concepts. That CPM value becomes the negotiating point. It's not just that unit, right? Because your unit cost may fluctuate depending on what the audience is telling you for that board or set of boards. And it allows you to potentially charge differently depending on the demographic audience. So let's go through a few examples. And again, if you have any questions or if there's anything that we're going to go through. Yeah?
Well, I'm sorry. I would like to just add that really using the reach and frequency numbers, and if nobody's using them or if you're not using them, the advertisers just soak that stuff up like a sponge, and it's really allowed us to get a much larger share of some of our big budgets. So it's been awesome for us.
You know, I think of it this way: when you go to a client and you give them an impression number, and we're talking about millions and millions of impressions on some of these units, it's definitely something that it's going to make them take notice. But can you imagine going up to them and telling them that yes, for the demographic profile that you're giving us, you're going to hit 75% of those people, or even the raw number of those people. You're going to reach 2 million unique people in this market. So for a local advertiser, there's so many different ways to look at these numbers and provide the storytelling that you can take a look at and really substantiate and, again, support the recommendations that you want to make. So I'm just going to go through a quick example first, and then we'll come back to some of the more complicated pieces. I masked this. This was actually an LA poster program. I was just playing around with trying to get something that might make sense. This kind of concept flows, whether it's a large market or a low market, doesn't really matter. But look at these two locations. They're both in the same county. They're on two different roadways, and roadway C actually has 484,000 weekly impressions against adults 18 plus versus the first one, which is only 422. In the past, you might have recommended C. It's a larger circulation, or now if you're substituting the word impression, it's a larger impression unit, right? Makes sense. Okay, but to your point, when you start delving a little bit more into the numbers, you actually see something a little bit different happening. I didn't make this up, by the way, just to make my point. This is an actual example.
I have one question.
Sure.
Is that a post? I'm right over here.
I'm like, where is it?
Right here.
Ah,
Is that a poster or is that a 14 by 48 bulletin? Because your
it's
poster.
a poster.
That's a 12 by 25. That would be in a showing, or
It's a single poster,
12 by 25, correct?
normal size.
Well, normal size is 14 by 48.
No, that's
close.
a bulletin.
Bulletin, okay, all
It's
right.
a poster.
Thanks, John.
It's a poster. This is on a highway, so obviously it's going to, it's going to, depending on where it is, you see it's got a lot of impressions associated with it. But the point is, again, when you're comparing it from one unit to the next and you're trying to craft a program, what's going on? So if I'm looking at that roadway C unit at 484,000, it's giving me more impressions against the adults 18 plus. Now, to your point, when I start looking at the reach and the frequency and all of the other elements that come up against this demographic, this is adults 18 plus. When I look at it, that second board, or really the roadway B board, I should say, that first one, actually reaches more people. That unit reaches an actual raw number of 192,000 people versus 173,000. That equates to a little under 1.5% of the population. If I'm a client and I'm looking at this, which is my better board? The one on B or the roadway C? I might like B. In looking at it as looking at it just singularly like this, that one unit, okay, I'm only looking at that one unit, but think about this when you're looking at some of your local clients and they've had their heart set on one of your higher circulation or one of your higher rated impressions or TRPs. When you start delving into the numbers of reach and frequency, you might get a slightly different story. Okay, so actually that first unit, roadway B, in the instance of I'm trying to reach more people, might make more sense for me. Simple. It really is pretty simple, but I think that sometimes this simplicity gets lost in, hey, let's sell audiences, let's evaluate on audiences. This is what we mean. If you then take it and you look at it against a different demographic, it's the same exact units, but now I'm comparing it and looking at a different demo, which is Hispanics, adults 18 to 49, again, if I'm only looking at total adult 18 plus, I'm not getting the full picture, right? I'm not getting the full picture. These units are actually, they're a little few, they're on different roadways. I didn't look at them to say, oh, the first unit on roadway B is in a Hispanic neighborhood. Didn't look at it. I didn't even touch where these are on the map. I'm just looking at the raw numbers. That roadway B unit delivers more Hispanic than this other unit. That's your story. Now, these units are very close. I purposely picked 2 units that had impressions that were very close to each other. But in some instances, you can look at a unit that may have, 1 million impressions versus a unit that only has, a fraction of that, but that other unit is so much better targeted to the demographic that the client is asking you for. And the other piece of it that we sometimes don't, I feel like we don't use it enough in the industry, coming from a general planning background, composition was one of my favorite numbers.
Mine too.
Favorite numbers. I use it, even now, I use it constantly. Do we know what that is? 41.3%, that's what that's saying. Do we know what that means? Anyone? Yes, so what we're saying is that out of all of the impressions that the unit is generating, 41% of them are against the demographic that we've defined, in this case, Hispanic adults 18 to 49. Almost half. Okay, the other unit is at 35%. When I did, and I'll show you another example later on, where when you look at this composition, you really see a very broad stroke. Some units are at these high levels, some units are at lower levels. Be careful using composition. Again, I love it, but you have to be very careful using it because unless you have a really truly defined demographic, it gets a little hinky to start using it because it's, look, we're still a pretty mass medium. We can figure out how to skew things based on audience profiles, but you have to use them judiciously. Does everybody understand? I mean, again, I'm trying to keep it like in a simple format. If it's too simple, we can move on and keep going, but I just want to make sure that everybody's getting this. So if I said to you, I'm a local advertiser, I really want that unit on that highway. I like that unit. So many cars are driving by that unit. I know on your sales sheet, it's got a ton of impressions. What would your response to me be? We're going to role play. Don't make me pick somebody. So talk about the targeted demographic impressions so we can look at that second column. So you may say, hey, Enza, I know you like that roadway C unit, but you might want to consider roadway B, right? I might want to consider roadway B. What if, typically for my posters, I sell them at the same price? Most of you guys sell them in packages. You don't really do different pricing for your individual units. So if the pricing is the same, the other story that we can craft is that, well, based on roadway B unit, you're actually going to get a better CPM. But what if you and I have already agreed on a CPM? What does that allow you to do? If I'm saying, it would be probably helpful if I had the numbers up there, so we're kind of talking a little esoterically here, but think about it from the standpoint of if I'm delivering more or you're delivering me more impressions with roadway B, what does that allow you to do? It allows you to charge a little bit more for that unit to bring it to the average CPM. So for my buyers out there, sorry, but it's the fair pricing model, right? That's selling on an audience, not just on a unit. So if you're selling typically in the market posters for $1,200 or $500 or $300, whatever it may be, by understanding who the demographic is that the client's going to be interested in, it allows you to really understand the value of that board, the value of that specific unit to that advertiser.
This way of thinking is going to multiply exponentially once we introduce the new version of the rating system. All of these are going to have multiple layers based on day parting alone. Seasonal adjustments, you're going to be looking at CPMs potentially by hour. And people, agencies in particular, tell me, when I say, why didn't you buy something? One of the things they always tell me is, I don't want waste. I'm not going to buy that bus shelter because I'm only interested in people that are commuting in and out of, I don't know, I'm making this up, Grand Central Terminal. Why am I buying all of the rest of those hours during the day? So when Operation More comes out, you'll be able to see the CPM, your CPM, adjust by every hour of the day, and you can price accordingly. So this is just the beginning.
Again, I'm going to try to do it as a build because now we're focusing on a single unit. And what did I say before? We're not selling units. I don't even know if I said that. I'm going to say it now. We're not selling units. We're selling audiences. That's what we keep saying. And that's true. We can, I mean, this is how you break down an individual unit and better understand its audience, okay? But it doesn't mean that we're going to completely walk away from location. But there's a question?
This looks fantastic. However, like even in this example, we're looking at posters. Suppliers are not, you buy a poster program, you want to reach a certain target audience, and we're talking about the numbers, but they're not charting it until, 3 weeks out or transit shelter showings or whatever the case may be. And so until it changes at that level, it's hard to sell from the agency level like this.
Yep.
And because we're not showing specific units, we're showing, a sample program that may be charted. This is what we're going to get, what our
Maybe we
goal
should
is.
Cut ahead to the next few slides, that might help.
Yeah, but I mean, I'd love to hear from everybody how we can fix that because I couldn't agree with you more. Do you want, I don't know where you want to.
Oh, yeah, we just said this.
Yeah, I think, everything that we have from today, yes, you'll be able to download it.
Just
So
keep going.
keep going, tell me where, because it's a lot of stuff.
Oh, go back. Back. Okay,
These are all my
That's-
slides, so.
yeah.
But this is such a valid question. It really is, because it requires us to think about our medium a little bit differently than we've had in the past. Now, I get that charting happens sometimes at a later date, especially when you're buying packages of units, and whether it's a bulletin and whether it's a bus shelter or whether it is, an urban panel. What does that all mean? So there's two things that can happen here. When you're looking at evaluating individual units, that means that you have to chart these earlier rather than later. But it also raises a different question. Does the location actually always become the prominent factor when you're selecting a program, or just making sure that the overall program of units that you've selected achieves your audience goals?
We say it's kind of like it's great now. TAB does have the average reach and frequency, and this, by market. Prior to that, we were just having to come up with it based on individualized units. And so from the supplier level, they need to present packages like that. We need to reach these numbers. This is what the overall media plan is including. We need to reach these numbers in this market with posters, bulletins, shelters, urban panels, whatever the case may be. And as long as the plan delivers it and the locations are good, again, we still get into those other factors too in terms of riding the markets even and seeing how the units look,
Right.
even though the ratings are what they are.
Right.
If they reach the numbers, then that's great, but it's not presented that way quite yet. So it's, how are we going to do that? We're piecemealing it together right now, and TAB is a fantastic tool for us to be able to do that because we have all the data at hand. But if it's not standardized across the suppliers in terms of how it's being presented or charted or what, our baseline is, it's, just kind of difficult on our end.
So what should we do? I mean, this is what we wanted this workshop to be, is, what are you dealing with on a day-to-day basis? Because we can stand up here and to your point, it looks great and rah, 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 and yeah, I didn't make up the numbers, they're really there, but when you are going back and you're dealing with the day-to-day, how are you truly implementing this?
If you think of an advertiser that's on the west side of the city, you can give him market impressions and achieve the goal. But he didn't want the other side of the city, but you put all the boards there. You achieved the goal, but you were in the wrong area. With TV, you don't have that. You turn it on, everyone sees it in the marketplace. But they still buy specific programs opposed to just achieving a goal. They want to be on Oprah, they don't want to be on the other show.
Right.
Same day part, same impressions perhaps, but a very
Right.
specific location. So I think you have to have both together.
You really can't walk away from the location piece too much. And, you know, again, sometimes I look around, I'm like, you know, hope nobody like yells at me afterwards for saying this, because I know we want to be so audience driven. And I think that there's a time and a place for that. To your point, especially now, we're going to have to make sure that we understand up front what the clients and goal, you know, it's always about listening to the client. Cannot say this enough. Sometimes I feel like we talk amongst ourselves, but we're not really listening to what the clients want. And what they want will help you determine how to approach the recommendation, whether you're trying to sell that plan or whether you're trying to figure out whether to buy that plan. Understanding what the client's goals are, it's going to be really critical. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go through another example where someone's just giving you, you know, 100 GRPs, that's their goal. How are you then going to deliver to that goal? There's so many different ways to do it. So many different ways to do that when you're looking at it, because you can get to 100 GRPs with 10 units, you can get to 100 GRPs with 20 units, 30 units, 50, 60, 70, 100 units. So the two things, you know, I don't think that right now from the short term we're going to have, you know, charting all of a sudden start putting out all of these different locations within your, you know, your recommendation right away. Maybe you can. But I think that the first step is making sure that there's the communication so that you manage those expectations. If somebody truly is just buying on audience, this isn't going to matter in the sense of you having to go in and, you know, look at individual units and start doing this type of analyses. You're going to start running through understanding how many units it's going to take to deliver to that impression number. And that's pretty simple, actually. You know, we complicate it because we're not used to doing that in this industry, but I think that it's probably one of the easiest ways to buy and sell media, because it is all based on quantitative. There's very little qualitative analysis involved with it. It's more of the science than it is the art, if you will. But let's not forget that out-of-home has a lot of art to it, so let's not lose that location piece. I can't say that enough. Is there a question? Yeah.
But with a showing, we've let them know, you know, you get a batch. We would, we'll prepare for them a sample of what an even distribution would be, and then we let them know that if it's important to them and they would like the follow-up upon charting, we'll then send them a new sheet.
Right.
And that's, so far, that's been
I mean, it
sufficient.
really is, it's not, I don't think it's asking us to do things so radically different than the way we're doing it. We're just kind of trying to put a little bit more of a process behind it so we understand it, and that things are going to be done up front in terms of what the clients are asking for. To your point, if somebody's cherry picking specific locations or specific areas, you might want to consider a cherry picking rate of some kind for that, right? There's, you know, if it's truly something that's very narrowly focused, there's nothing wrong with you wanting to get value, a fair value for that. Whereas if they're running run of market, I'm not going to use the word showing, but if they're running, you know, run of network, run of market, however you want to think about it, then yes, you might be able to give them a cheaper rate in order to do that. Anything else? Was there something back there? No, you're just waving at me? Hi. Okay.
Mark up the rates based on someone coming in and cherry picking, because I feel like our buyers would never allow that.
Well, I can totally give you my opinion, but we have buyers. I know, I see some of them. Anybody want to answer that before I dive in? How would you feel about somebody charging you more money for isolating either an area or a specific location, set of locations?
I personally wouldn't have a problem with that, because I did it across every other media type. You know, you pay more for live sports than you would for, you know, local news, because, you know, you're getting a quality audience and a more desirability. So to me, I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Okay, so there's someone there who's saying that they don't have a problem. Some of my other buyers.
I would say, I don't have a problem with it either. At the same time, I don't want to put my client in a position where they have to pay a premium, so I'm going to work with them, try to expand a pool and maybe have a approved pool that eliminates some units I don't want, but still gives the vendor flexibility.
I mean, there's definitely different ways to, when we do these kinds of training, it's always easier to kind of show the example in a very extreme, one side versus the other side. But we know that in between, there's a lot going on. So there's different ways to approach it. It could be that could work, but Simone? Mike? Poor Kevin. I drive this poor guy crazy on a day-to-day basis, and I'm doing it again today.
I would expect to pay a premium on hyper-targeted locations, but in the example of the poster, like if an operator decided that, A versus B, there was higher ratings, and I knew that my, total package was marked up based on that, I would have an issue. I would have to have some guarantee of over-delivery or something to substantiate the added cost.
That makes sense? Everybody follow that? Okay.
Right, so over-delivery is something that is going to come up again with Operation More. So if you have the ability to understand the real traffic that is coming by your location after you've bought it, see, we're just dealing with planning rates up here. This is what we think is usually happening, and we just sort of take that for granted. And the proof of performance is limited to, did you put the sign up on time? That's going to change now. Now it's going to be, I have my planning rate. Did I deliver what my planning rate was? And the industry really has to come together and understand the ramifications of this make-good system. That other media do this. They have a make-good system. And the way around it, for television, oftentimes it's if they really do poorly, they have to put other commercials in it. We don't have that luxury. So what you could do is set a rate base, it's called, a sort of, I know for a fact, I believe 99 times out of 100 that I'm going to achieve this goal. And that would be your rate base goal. And then when you over-deliver on that, that becomes your bonus impressions. So that's something that can be guaranteed moving forward. Easier.
Moving on? We're good?
I'm going to slip to the next example
Okay.
and skip over these word slides.
Actually, I think this is kind of important.
All right.
Again, for anyone who sat here, it was funny, I was just telling a few people that I can't believe it was 8 years ago that I attended my first out-of-home conference in this very hotel. And it's been 8 years that I've been saying, strategy, not tactics, strategies, not tactics. Because I think someone said it earlier, we've said it a lot over the conference, that when you are a tactic, it's something that you're added onto a plan at either the last minute, something that's easily pulled out because all of a sudden a budget is cut. But if you become interwoven into a client's marketing and advertising strategy, it's a lot harder for them to just yank it. Not that it's not going to happen, but it makes it much more difficult for them to think about, well, if I pull this strategy out of my plan, there's going to be consequences to what it is that I'm going to be able to achieve in the marketplace. So a strategy really means about, a client, again, for us, we want to sell out of home. We love out of home. I'm a general planner, but I've loved out of home my entire career. Over 27 years, I have pushed out of home for 27 years. I think it's a great medium. I think that the landscape that it provides is truly amazing. I think that, it's so underused in the marketplace. But I get it from the standpoint of how does it fit into what a client is trying to do? And that is something that we all have to get much better at doing, is asking questions. What is this client trying to accomplish? And again, I don't care if it's this, super local advertiser versus a national advertiser. The grids kill me. I'm going to tell you, the grids absolutely kill me, because I think that sometimes when you have that standardization, you start to lose the texture of what it is that the client is trying to accomplish in the marketplace. I get that grids are important because that template of pulling information back in and being able to put it into the software systems, being able to fulfill your macros on your PowerPoint, I get all of that. But We need to make sure that the integral piece of why is this client even looking at out of home, why aren't they looking at out of home, is really critical for us to understand. We need to make sure that we give them that information to that, we always talk about right audience at the right time, at the right place, et cetera, et cetera. It's about those relevant eyeballs, and that's what strategy is about. I think, you said it before, we don't want to waste our money. We don't want to go after people that we're not interested in. We want to hit those people as effectively and as efficiently as possible. Always the two key words growing up in the media world: has to be effective and it has to be efficient at the same time. The weight of advertising is a strategy. How much do I need to buy to make something happen in the marketplace, whether it's to increase the awareness of my program, whether it is to somehow change the perception of my brand, or whether it is to actually close the sale. There's a weight level attached to that. And by weight level, I mean how much advertising do I need to buy? And then the last piece of it is when you talk about CPMs and CPPs, cost per points and cost per thousand, that type of trading and cost parameters really allows you, again, to talk to the client in terms of the weight level against the relevant eyeballs that'll help them fulfill their marketing goals. The circle gets completed that way. If we're just throwing unit pricing out there, that's a problem. Okay, that doesn't mean much. I need to understand what that value is. CPMs and cost per points do that. I've said this for many years, and those of you who work with me on a regular basis know that I'm a big proponent of 5 questions that you constantly have to ask before you even sit down, and I don't care if you are a buyer, I don't care if you are a seller. You need to have these 5 pieces of information. Who is the demographic target audience that this client is trying to reach? And the case I'm going to show you now, we're going to look at an adult 18 to 49 with a household income of $75,000 plus. I picked LA, I don't know why, because it was sunny when I started to do this. It was cold in New York. So we're going to look at the LA, and we're going to look at the designated market area, not even the CBSA. It's a big market. And the client asked us for 100 weekly GRPs or TRPs. Does anyone, when you get that, so I'm going to kind of separate this a little bit from the seller side. I'm going to ask this question. So when you're getting an RFP and somebody says that they want 100 weekly GRPs in your market, have you ever asked a simple question of why? Where's that 100 coming from? How do I fulfill that 100? I'm sorry? You're just, all right, so what if they ask you for 25? Then you want to know why. You want to know what they're trying to accomplish. Yeah. And I know that sometimes I think we all feel a little uncomfortable delving into, like, if somebody is gracious enough to put you in their consideration set and ask you for 100 GRPs, you're like, whoa, let me go back and see how many units I have available, let me throw it on there. But I think the most important thing, especially because this is still somewhat new to us, is to try to understand why clients are asking for that. Why would Christina ask you for 100 weekly points for any of her clients? Why would Simone go in and ask you for that? There's reasons why clients are trying to make those decisions. And right now, it's kind of a little bit of a guesswork in our industry, because we don't have the same level of benchmarks that we do with some of the other programs. But 100 always feels like, oh, it's kind of like the minimum in some of the markets. Smaller markets maybe might get a little bit less than that. But 100 weekly points, 50 weekly points, based on historical data, based on maybe competitive data, the client may come up with this. But it's important for us to figure that out. Why are they asking for it? And the other thing is, how do they want to get to that 100 weekly points? A GRP sounds great, but there's a lot of different ways to add up to that GRP value. So what are you going to do to get to that GRP value? How are you going to approach this? So I'm going to put the question out there to some of the buyers first. How are you guys making the decision on your weekly points if that's what you're asking for? I know not everybody does that yet. Anybody willing to share that? How are you coming up with your week, whether it's 100 or 50 or whatever it might be?
We do it several ways. We do it with a lot of retailers, so it may be based on the penetration of the retailer in the market. We have one retailer that would categorize their market as emerging, steady state, or developed, and those levels that they deem their entry into the market would deem our TRP level.
So a lot of times it's, again, if they are someone who maybe their budget's going to allow them to just do a baseline minimum in the marketplace could determine what the weight level is, or maybe they want to create an impact. So now let's just take it a little step further and ask, so how do we get to those 100 GRPs? How do you start building to those 100 GRPs? So actually, you know what? Forget about what's on the screen for now. I'm trying to rush it along because I want to make sure we get to everything. But how would you then start to answer that question of, hey, I need 100 GRPs in that LADMA, that's your market. How would you start to fulfill it?
What I do in our movement is, one, you gotta find some of these other questions, who is the target, kind of look at, well, one, you look at all these things to be able to do it. You look at the timing, what do you have available at the time, what is the target, what's really gonna reach it, and then for me, once I discuss with the planner, are they looking for general coverage? Are they looking for a specific area? That's where the individual, vendor who's selling it, who knows their inventory, is able to help you rather than just go through the list, okay, here's my top 10, I hit your,
Right.
Here's 10 of them that hit 10, I'm done. Look at the whole bigger picture of what the client is trying to achieve and make sure that the locations are still getting that. So you have to look at all of those to even get to it, rather than, okay, I get 10 and I'm done.
Right.
That's not what you want to do.
About understanding, again, going back to that client piece. So what I want to actually do now is I want to take you through 3 very different plans that all achieve 100 weekly points in the LA market. Okay, so we with me so far? Hope I don't lose you. There's a lot of numbers that are going to be flashing on the screen, and I kind of like took out some of the highlights. But the client, I actually, I struggled with this word. I was looking at Jeff, I'm like, I hate the word average plan. It sounds so terrible. But I'm just talking about a client, they're looking for 100 weekly points. They want to have that weight level in the marketplace. It's kind of sounds boring, but it's something that's really sustainable. They want to go in and they want to start buying against this audience, and they want those 100 GRPs. That's what I would label an average plan. But then you may have a client that they want some premium kind of connotation to their plan. They're not so interested in so many different units, but they want some of these big units, some iconic units. They're launching a new brand, or maybe they have a line extension. Maybe they really need to generate some awareness, and they're really focused on, I want to really seem big in the marketplace. So that's something I would label maybe a premium campaign. That's going to have an impact on the number of units as well as the cost. And then you may have a client, I say this every year, like P&G. I'm waiting for P&G to come into the out-of-home fold. But they are an efficiency type of advertiser. They buy what I call tonnage. That's the word that we always used on P&G. They want a lot of units. They want things that are really super efficient. They just want quantity. It's not that they want garbage, but they want quantity over like a pure quality plan. So those are 3 different tactics or 3 different ways to fulfill to that 100 GRPs. So how do you select units based on that? And I'm actually going to ask you to really think about is how do you build to a plan? How do you respond back to this client? And if, depending on those types of objectives. Look, your charting systems, I don't know how many of you have actually changed your charting systems since the TAB ratings have come out. Have any of those charting systems kind of like dipped into the TAB ratings and pulled them in so that you could go in and take a look at your units based on a demo, based on a geo, and actually get the impressions and TRPs off of it? Not many. I mean, there's some. I know that there's there's definitely some out there, but charting programs really need to be updated to reflect this so that we're not talking off of 2 different systems, because right now what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to go into the TAB database, whether it's the ADS system, the O-Plan system, or Telmar if you're a subscriber, and you're going to have to look at it. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to take it from the standpoint of that little extra work of you having to go into your actual unit selection based on the ADS or the out-of-home, the O-Plan system. The first thing you need to know is what's the average for your market. It's like a rating. When I buy TV and I buy 50 points in Prime, if my average rating for a program in Prime is a 3, how many units can I afford to buy? 50 divided by 3. It's pretty simple, right? But I know that that's the average, and that average fluctuates depending on the actual program that I'm selecting. You know, if I'm buying some of the top rated stuff, that average rating may be a 6 or a 7. I don't even know if they go up that high anymore. Probably more like a 4, maybe 2.7. But regardless, you need to know what the average is for your market. So this is a screenshot from OPlan, which is on the TAB website, and all I did was put in the parameters. I'm not going to teach you how to use OPlan. They have, you know, after hours, office hours that you can have to. Yeah, I'm still a little hungover from last night.
You know, I didn't have anything to drink last night, and I know all of you did, so I appreciate you being here.
Okay, so for the market average analysis, I just put into the OPlan system that it was the LA DMA, made sure that it's specific because it has a huge implication on what these numbers say. It's against adults 18 to 49, and with that household income of 75,000 plus. And all I did was in this weekly target section right here, right there, I put in 100 to see, on an average, how many units. This is bulletins, I'm only looking at bulletins, okay? So I'm trying to keep it simple so we can get super complicated with all of the formats. But all I did was put in the 100 GRPs to determine roughly how many actual units and bulletins it takes to accomplish that, and then I get all of my other information from there. I put in the estimated cost because my cost that the client has is $200,000, and I want to see if that makes sense. So the CPM for the market is about $13.20. I can live with that. Against adults 18 to 49, household income 75,000 plus. This is not adults 18 plus where we're going to have a $2 CPM. Okay, so we're good. We're good with double digits when you do something more focused. So based on this, what do I know? 45 units, 100 weekly GRPs. I have my CPM of $13. What does this tell me? Tells me that my average rating for each, bless you, for each unit is roughly 2.2. Simple math. 100 divided by the 45 panels gives me a 2.2 average rating. The other thing that I like to do, because remember how I said I'm really big on composition? I like to see what percent that demographic audience makes up of the adult population. So I take my 75,000 adult 18 to 49 population of almost 3.8 million divided by the total LA population of 14, and I get 27%. Just keep that number in mind. Adults 18 to 49, household income 75,000 plus, make up 27% of the total adult 18 plus population. We good? Okay. So I actually went in here, I picked one operator, because if I did the whole market, I would want to shoot myself. It takes a long time for the database to do it. But I picked one, one operator, which is what you guys would do, not the buyers. You guys are, if you're doing this, you're going to have to look at everything in the marketplace. But for the sellers, you could go in and you would pull up your inventory, and you can rank every single one of your units against that demographic profile, looking at the weekly TRPs to see how it compares to the average of the 2.2, as well as look at what? Composition and CPM for that individual unit. I've only pulled out a little more than a handful of units in the LA market. You have to remember, when I did this, I actually did this for one of my clients. So when I pulled this up for them, I did 707-something units, and I did a ranker for them. So every single piece of their inventory was ranked against the demo. I pulled up what the weekly TRP is. Remember, what was my average? 2.2. What did I say was the percent composition of the 27? So now, on an individual basis, what I did was I started to look at all of these different units and started to compare it to the composition as well as to the weekly TRP. Now look at what happened. I mean, again, this kind of goes back to that first example that I showed you. There's a unit in the LA County that has a weekly GRP value of 6.8, 3 times higher than the average. Wow, it's so great. And look at my comp. That's really pretty hefty. I also have some units that are different. I have a unit that's only 1 weekly TRPs, but my composition is a 39. That's a pretty good unit. That's still pretty targeted. Remember, my population base is 27%. So it's not saying that you always have to take high-rated units. You can pull some of them, the lower-rated units, but just know what that means. The more lower rated units you pick, the more units it's going to take to get up to the 100.
And Enza, if I may, this isn't going to change when we introduce Operation More. It's still going to be impressions, it's still going to be ratings, it's still going to be cost per thousand. So all of this carries over. The only thing that's going to change is instead of one screen looking at it, almost look at it as a Rubik's Cube. Because you're going to have different day parts, you're going to have a lot more information available to you, but this process is the same.
Just a question. If I want to get that 100 TRP and I want to use bulletins and posters and shelters to do that, does the system allow for me to do a cumulative?
Yes, actually, my efficiency plan that I'm going to show you is, I think, 62 units, and it's a combination of bulletins and posters that I selected to do that. So yeah, you could do it however you needed to.
And is that all done in OH plan?
O plan, I'm sorry, I should have said that. O plan only gives you this. It gives you an average. So it'll give you an average by format, whatever's in the system, including transit. That's in there. Once you go into this screen, you have to pull this down from the ADS system or the Telmore system if you are a subscriber to it. Again, the TAB has all the tutorials online. I think you guys have recorded every webinar that you've done, so these guys have been good about doing that. Okay? Good? Okay. So again, I just want to show you, so many different types of units that we can select from. The reason why I put that gray bar kind of across this is that if I look at some of these other units, look at the first 3 units, an 8.3, a 4.4, a 4.4, even the one down on the Riverside one of a 2.3. They are either at average or above average on my rating points. But look at my composition. Is that good or bad? I shouldn't use the word bad. Is that as good as the ones that are above the gray line? They're not as good, they're not as targeted. Doesn't mean to say that you might not want to include them in a package, or maybe the client will be willing to evaluate it, but they're not as targeted to this demographic. Even though they are providing a pretty significant amount of GRPs, they're not really that targeted to the demographic. That's what audience evaluation of units really gives you. So I'm going to look at it this way. The average plan, I'm going to try to select units from that 700 list that I had when I ranked them. I'm going to look at units that have a really decent composition, at least somewhere in that 27 range, if not a little bit higher. And I'm really only going to look at units in that 2.2 range, maybe a little bit higher, maybe a little bit lower. But that's what my average plan is doing. Maybe I'll even throw in a few 10.3 weekly GRPs in there, knowing that how that's going to affect it. My premium plan, I decided, if my average is 2.2, and that's my average rating on a unit, I'm going to look for units that are at least 3 times that amount. That's really targeted, but really high numbers, because that's what the client told me. Remember what I said, that first plan is an average, that second plan is more of a premium plan. And then my efficiency plan, well, it's kind of a combination of everything. Because it's the CPM that's really going to drive it against this demographic. And I'm going to look for units that are both average. I really don't want to look at too many units that are below average, but I'm going to incorporate some of those in there so I can make sure to bring the CPM down. And I'm really going to start looking at it from the standpoint of really targeted. So composition becomes really critical for me, and my weekly rating points, I'm a little open to what I'm going to look at. Because as long as it's got a high composition, it's going to be on the plan. That's my efficiency plan. So remember the market average. This is what I pulled from O-Plan. 45 panels, they achieved almost a 46% reach. Weekly GRPs were 100, and all of the relevant information. My percent composition is at 27%. I'm looking for units that represent at least 27% of their impressions against the demo. And I have a planned cost of about $200,000, and my CPM goal is $13.20. And my cost per point comes out to 500. Cost per point, cost divided by your total impressions. Okay, just quick math. My average plan, if the client is looking for an average program, they're going to want that 45 number of locations. That's what they're going to look for. 46, 47, 42, 43, they'll be comfortable with that. That's the average. That plan, and these again are numbers that I pulled directly from selecting numbers. When I did this for my client, the main thing that I told them was that I don't know the market as well as you. So you have to look at these units and tell me what I did wrong, because maybe I didn't pick good units, but from a quantitative standpoint and just a pure analysis on audience, this is what I came up with. I found 45 units. They delivered a better, slightly better reach, frequency, et cetera. They delivered, a little under my impression count. I was able to deliver it to the $200,000 plan goal. My composition average for that package is 31 versus 27. I'm good. Client's going to be happy. I delivered to their average plan. Yes? Feeling good about that one?
We got it.
Okay. Premium, only 12 units. Is that good? Why is that good? The premium units. I only needed 12 of them. I only needed 12 of these highly targeted, high-rated units to achieve my planned TRPs of 100 weekly points. My CPM is actually a little bit higher in this one, because it actually cost me $215,000. I had to bring my budget up slightly because the client wanted my premium units. That's okay. That's what the client wants. Again, it's that communication. And then my efficiency, 61 units to achieve the same weekly GRPs. But the other thing that we want to look at, to your point earlier, is look at that reach column and how it fluctuates. I mean, it's minor, some of it is minor, but it does fluctuate. So just looking at the GRPs, while it's important and you can sit there and you can look at your units this way, understanding ultimately what the reach is going to be critical too. My efficiency plan, because I have so many units and they're so dispersed across the marketplace, is going to ultimately give me a higher reach. Doesn't mean that that's what the client asked me for, right? If they want premium units, they wanted something that gave them a sense that they owned the market because they were on the big units, the iconic units. That's fine. We answered the client goal. Just a map to kind of show you the color coding. We're going to keep going. Transit. I feel like we've been talking about bulletins and posters and to a certain extent, street furniture in here. What about transit? How does transit fit into all of this? Anybody here represent transit? A few. I love transit ratings because it is a pure impression buy straight through and through. I am not selecting individual locations. I'm not saying it's got to be on that bus. It's got to be on that interior of the bus. I might say I want that station if it's a station piece of it. But you really are selling impressions. I can achieve 100 weekly GRPs when I am spreading them out across some ultra super kings across the two major bus systems in the market, as well as combining it with bus kings. And look at my reach when I did that. Transit's great. Good stuff. Again, people are not using transit. This was 8 months ago?
Yeah.
Maybe even longer than that, a little longer than that. We're not seeing an uptick, but transit's set up for a pure impression buy. What about digital networks? Does anyone here have digital? Okay, so a few of you have digital. Digital is so set up for impressions, so set up for it. So if I have agreed to a $25 adult 18 to 49 CPM and my budget is still $200,000, I can go in and I can go through that whole exercise of going in and selecting my individual locations, or maybe you're selling a network, but if you've got digital bus shelters, digital urban panels, Link in New York, that's just coming up. If you want to look at it that way, you can just sell it based on the impressions. If I've got $200,000, how many impressions can I buy? You know what the formula is for the CPM. That's your cost divided by your impressions multiplied by 1,000. It's sheer math. I've got my budget and I've got my CPM. So I'm going to solve for how many impressions I can buy and I can afford for adults 18 to 49. I'm going to take my budget, divide it by my CPM times 1,000, that's going to equal my impressions. I can buy 8 million adult 18 to 49 impressions on the digital network. I don't care where they are. As long as you disperse them across the marketplace, I'm buying 8 million impressions. How do you feel about that one? I'm getting nothing.
really adjusted. Have you adjusted them yet, or is it still for location?
It's per spot.
It is per spot, it has been adjusted.
It has been adjusted, yes. So it is based right now, whatever the network is selling. So let's say it is digital urban panels, you may be one advertiser out of 8, it's adjusted for it having 8 spots in that slot, if you will, or 8 slots. I always get that wrong. Miko, you're not supposed to hear that I said spots. 8 slots, you can look at it that way, or some of them have 6. So yes, you do have it on a per spot basis.
We have to ask each operator to tell us, on average, how many slots they have and how long each slot is visible, which they love giving me, by the way. And that's how we generate the ratings and impressions.
No, digital's been out there for over a year.
Which is sometimes a problem when people go to the wrong part of the, if you go to the wrong part of the TAB data, you can sometimes find digitals listed in bulletin. And that throws everything all off.
Okay, I will jump on that.
I take no responsibility for that one, sorry. But yes, I mean, they should definitely be in there. It's been over a year that the digital per spot rotation piece has been taken into consideration. But the concept here is that when you have digital, it really becomes so much more flexible, right? Everything becomes so much more flexible because you can run a client's spot until you meet that 8 million goal. If that's the CPM that you've determined is appropriate, that's what you can run. Now, again, this is probably a little futures away from us right now to just completely buy that open-ended, but it's where you really want to get to, because if you think about programmatic or you think about any of those ad-serving platforms, what are they doing? They're just picking up the impressions. How many impressions does this client want and at what CPM? Let me run that. That's, the 15-second or 30-second spot. Let me run it until they fulfill their advertising goal. There's going to be parameters on there. I only want to run it, between the hours of maybe X and Y, or maybe I want to be full run of network, or maybe I want to be focused. You can put parameters on it, but it is not going in and selecting, I want that digital urban panel in Chicago, and then I want the other digital urban panel in Chicago. It's the ability to run it across the marketplace, and the ad-serving technology will be able to do that. That's where we want to get to. This is critical if we want people to start to evaluate our medium alongside other media. Because that's how digital is bought, that's how TV is bought, yes.
How did you determine the CPM on that? 25?
I made it up. I did make it up, but I made it up from understanding what was going on in the marketplace. I mean, CPM is a factor of what? It's a factor of what you want to charge on a per unit basis, plus really what the ultimate average impression is, so you can get to a CPM that you're comfortable with. A digital CPM against adults 18 to 49 for $25 is actually really reasonable when I compare it to other things that are happening. So it'll be marketplace, it'll be competitive to what maybe other digital networks are charging, what digital online is charging, and what TV is charging in the marketplace. That's how you would develop it.
The vendor choosing that rate or the client?
Well, I think the vendors need to have some baseline cost parameters, and then it's a negotiation process, right? You may want $30, but I'm going to settle on $25. That's what I think it's valued at. But you should walk into the negotiation with what you think the value of your programs are.
The other thing we should add is these systems are going to have, I hope soon, preset costs in there that you can adjust. So if you're brand new to the market, brand new to the medium, at least have a starting point. I think that's a critical step that we need. Yeah.
Can I just add that you also want to know what your competitors and the other media are charging so that you can grow out of home as a category. If you're way off and they can get more efficiency and more reach by buying radio, that's why you're losing out, and you're not going to be on the plan, and they'll cut you first.
That's a big point. One of the things I always talk about when I'm on the road is we tend to focus on just, and this is a wonderful way to plan out of home if you've already made the decision on out of home. But all of these other media have systems like this, and we should all strive to have access to that. You may have to spend a little money. But the fact is, the best way quantitatively to figure out how to get more money in our medium is to compare our numbers side by side with other media. And it works because when you go through this process for all the other media and you go through what's called a media mix or a mix master or whatever they call it in these systems, 99 times out of 100, when you add out-of-home to a broadcast buy, you will generate higher impressions, higher ratings, better efficiencies across the board. So what I tell general planners all the time is, just think about this. Just think of taking 3, 4, 5% of your TV budget and move it into out-of-home. And look at what the systems will generate for you. A much more effective and efficient buy every time. Because that's the way the math works, but that's also reality. People are outside the home. They're not home watching television.
You know, the other thing is, you know, we talked about the adoption curve, and we'll come back to that. The thing, you know, as a planner, I've been sitting here struggling with, okay, we have the numbers. Why aren't they coming? You know, why aren't they buying or considering out of home the same way that they are doing other media? And I do think, we've been struggling with that for some time to figure out the solution to that. Yes, we're going to do outreach, and Jeff is going to go through that now. I'm going to shut up real soon. But the thing that I think was missing was that I think that people still think of us as, I have to buy specific locations. Oh my God, that is so time consuming. I'll never forget the first time that I truly went through an out-of-home plan and had all of those photo sheets spread out on a conference room table going, I gotta pick units from this? This is gonna take me forever to do. I don't wanna do that, I don't have the time to do that, but if I can start to buy things based on impressions and understand the value that I'm getting for it, and that's how you're selling it, that's how you're recommending it, and then that's how I'm gonna compare it, to Jeff's point, to other media, that'll help. I think that'll help. It's still not going to be, let's turn the light on, we're going to run this electricity, we're going to turn the lights on, everybody's going to start coming. It's not going to work that easily, but we have got to change the way that we think about our formats. We've got to start thinking in terms of the audience. We've got to start moving away from everything being so location driven. It's still a huge strength of ours. I would never tell you to walk away from it, but it can't be where you start from.
That's a good segue.
It is.
So I like that idea because looking through all the photo sheets is bananas. But when you have a market like LA and you have so many operators, we can ask for the 100 TRP level, but we then have to puzzle piece that together out of 1 to 20 operators and then get the 100 TRP. So at some point we do need that subjectivity and that nuanced expertise to pick those locations.
That's where the specialists are really valuable.
Right, I was going to say, isn't that the value that you bring?
This is the thing. Everybody's always, oh, this person's not doing this and that person's not doing that, and they're preventing me from going to this person and that person and the other person. I say, that's a reason to show your value. You know the market. And whenever specialists feel, I don't know what the word is, squeezed or, irritable, or I don't know what you call it, but that's a reminder that the ratings are doing nothing, but they're making the specialists even more valuable, because just knowing the locations are important.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and piecing it together isn't easy. And that, on the other flip side, as a seller, if you get an RFP and you can't achieve that 100 weekly GRPs, what should you do? Tell them and figure out what you would recommend from your inventory, because to Simone's point, hopefully what they're doing is they're RFPing other people in the marketplace, and they can start adding things together. Oh, I'm going to take a piece from this, and I'm going to take a piece from that, and now I've got my 100. So don't be afraid when you get those RFPs and you look at some of these numbers, you're like, well, my inventory is not going to, especially transit. If you start dealing with transit, you're not going to get to 100 weekly GRPs when you're talking about platforms or any kind of interiors. It's not going to happen. But you combine it with other things, and it will.
Yeah. That happens all the time. I get calls like that all the time. This guy's asking for 11 billion GRPs, and I can't fill in my RFP. Well, Tell them.
Give them what you think is reasonable.
So, all right, almost done. We need to Enza's point, need to start thinking more about audience and less about locations. Not stop thinking about locations, but a little bit less. And we need to start asking ourselves some serious questions. Number one is, what are our charting systems doing? What do we lead with when we are charting? We are leading with, I want this location, that location, that location, that location, its location. And even though you know better that you should be thinking about audience, that charting system keeps pointing your employees back to location first. So that's something we should probably pay attention to. The other is pricing. How are we pricing our inventory? I don't have access to pricing data a lot of times, but I can tell you that whenever somebody has problems with pricing, you know, a lot of times they're pricing everything to the impression or to a CPM, where if you calculate a CPM, the price is always the same. Pricing has to become much more dynamic. It has to be attached to not just demand and impressions, but to all of the different demographics, everything that could possibly happen. And you could systemize this. You could figure out from a pricing model how to do this. So pricing has to become dramatically more complicated in a good way, because there are plenty of times when you can upcharge and you're not because your systems aren't keeping up to date. Yeah. As much as we can.
When you say you want to apply to CPMs and you want to apply it to gross rating points, I got a Great Wall on I-95. You're going to tell me that you're not going to take that Great Wall because it's based on rating points? I mean, the buyer wants to buy the great location, so I kind of see that getting thrown, at least from my point of view, getting thrown out. I mean, you want to buy that great location.
I would, yeah.
Go ahead.
I would say that's not at all what I would say. I think that if the client wants to buy that specific location because of whatever reason, they're not an impression GRP-oriented buy. So yeah, you've got to sell it the way that you can, and the client wants to buy it that way. Why do people? I always use this example. Why do people buy? You know,
I'm not trying to
March
argue
Madness?
the point. I'm not.
You know, they buy it because of the. They want to be in that environment.
You know, when you were like a small operator like myself, you're kind of trying to sell to a client based on, you know, your location out there, and you're trying to get the maximum rate out there. So, you know, it kind of falls through the cracks with that, you know, in that sense.
No, because I still think you can use the numbers to help tell the story. If you're trying to tell the client that you want to sell them those specific units because of a location-based things, I would skim through the numbers to see if there's a story that you can create there. You know, there's no black and white in this, because you can't just walk away from just being a location. I don't want you to just be location. I don't want you to just be quantitative. I want you to use both. And I want you to figure out what you want to weigh heavier depending on the client that you're talking to.
I'm glad I'm 65 and only got 5 more years. Thank you.
Other areas we need to kind of start thinking about is, what is our overall sales and buying approach? And by this I mean, if somebody calls one of your sales reps or something along those lines and says, hey, I want this unit, does the sales rep, are they incented to say, okay? Or are they incented in a way to suggest, well, let me start asking some questions. You know, what is it you want to achieve as a campaign, not so much a location? What do client briefs tell you? Are they asking you for locations with no understanding why? I want this many locations. That's a perfect opportunity to get closer to your client. What are the role of metrics that they're playing in your process? And what I mean by this is, are you taking the old showing numbers and replacing them one-to-one with GRPs and impressions? If you're doing that, I would kindly suggest there's more you could do. And what is your incentives system? How are your salespeople, how are your buyers incented? This is a big one for me, because I look at how the process works. Nobody is incented financially to do more. The agency and the advertiser, they're busy. They love all of this stuff. They love it, but they're busy. The specialist, you know, they're maybe not always connected to how much money they can get out of their medium. And the salesperson has the easiest job of all. I just want to sell my inventory for the biggest price I can. But what is the incentive system for the rest of the system? How are you incenting people to work harder? And remember, we talked about pull versus push in the beginning. We've been pushing a lot. But the real changes always happen at the top with the advertiser, you know, the big, big changes. P&G introduced the optimizers. That was awful for me. I was the optimizer guy at Y&R, and let me tell you, it's like P&G calls you up and says, here, do this, or you're dead. You know, you do it. Unilever introduced communications planning. P&G again, Ford and GM, they introduced the whole concept of pay-per-click. So if we want real change, it starts at the top, and then everybody else will follow. Now, why am I telling you this? It's because we have to do everything we can to get in front of the advertiser with the specialists' help and make sure that they understand what the opportunities are for them to change. And if we can get one big guy or even one medium-sized guy to do something different, the rest will follow. So how do we engage advertisers directly? How do we focus on their needs? That's really the question we all have to ask ourselves every day, and I know you do. So really, as we go through the adoption process, we talked a lot about using audience metrics today, and what Enza was going through is really how planning is done, how we have to do planning. Once we work through that process and it becomes inculcated and part of our, how we do things, then we start to understand the agency and client ownership issue. So we can begin to start changing the conversation from, well, how many locations do you want, to understanding a real integrated marketing communications plan and how out-of-home fits in. You have the tools today. You could do this today. We don't need to wait for Operation More, although Operation More is frankly more, and it's better, but you can start today. Start practicing today. So I have a lot to do as well. I'm not just saying run off and do stuff, okay? I'm in this with you. I need to work harder on helping people understand how to establish benchmarks, how to start. I need to work harder on working with these ROI expert modelers to help them understand how to model our inventory the best way possible so we don't get killed, because you got to watch those guys. We need to have a more focused website presence. How many people like the TAB website? How many people hate the TAB? Yeah, that's a better question. Me too. And we need to really better resource what we have on that site. And I have a new job. My job is to basically come out to you and help you understand what it is we're doing. So call me, I will come, and we will work on this together. So continual training and outreach. And this is where I think the industry really dropped the ball the first time. So we did not fully satisfy the entire product. We came out with a physical product, but we didn't come out with the promotion very well. We didn't come out with distribution very well, and it shows. So we're not going to make that mistake again. TAB is old school now, all right? We're changing. We're trying to become more aggressive with what it is we're trying to do. We're trying to help you become more comfortable quicker. We're not going to just lay everything on you and say, you figure it out and tell me what it is you want to do. We're more in your face, and for that, I'm sorry, but hopefully it'll work out. We also started a new brand called Geek Out. I'd like to think I'm not a geek, but most people assume that I am. And what this is going to do is provide helpful guidelines for education, position papers, social media issues. Under education, we're instituting out-of-home office hours. All of these are webinars that help people understand all of the things that we talked about today and other areas that are of concern. They're going to be posted on our website. We started doing those weekly, by the way. That's been rough. It's hard to keep up with the content, so I think probably bi-weekly or monthly. We also have an open helpline. You could just type in Geek Out at tabonline.com, and somebody will call you back same day. So please make use of that. My training budget, I have a training travel budget now. Position papers, this really is about TAB having points of view. We were always scared to do this because we were a ratings agency and that's what we did. But now we've got to become more aggressive as an industry and have real published points of view on things that are important. Like, how do we calculate ROI for out-of-home? How do we do planning? How do we do things? What are the guidelines? What are the standards? Under social, we're doing a lot more with not just Twitter and Facebook and all of those things, but really starting to get more interactive with relationship platforms and hopefully bringing in new clients as a result. So we're going to be more in your face, and I hope you make use of it. What can we do together? It's still an idea medium. Nothing's changed. The only thing that's changed is that we're measuring things differently, which is good. It's what we wanted. But everything still starts with an idea, a great idea. And if you have one that's based on all of the things that Enza talked about today, that leverages the new rating system, even better, because that gets into one of our big Achilles heels, according to the advertisers, which is, what's my ROI? What's my ROI? So if you have an idea, see if you can pull it together with the systems we have at your disposal. And if you need help, we'll help you. This is Enza's slide, but basically, action changes things. So act, and that's good advice. You know, the tendency in this industry is to kind of wait for the next thing to show up and not change the way we think about our business from a ratings perspective and what it is we're doing from a ratings perspective that's different. People tell me all the time, just go. Fix it as you go, but just go. This is our contact information. Feel free to use us. And you guys were wonderful staying here from 2 to 4 on a Wednesday. And then with that, we can answer any other questions you might have. Yeah? Yeah, you?
Just a quick question. We've heard a little bit about what Operation More will do, and one of the things I'm excited about is the ability to drill down to smaller segments like cities.
Right.
One of the things that I've bumped into is if a client has a 90-day plan and they want to hit 100 TRP, say, and they're going to buy 5 posters, and then they're going to go to 5 different posters and 5 other posters over a 90-day period.
Right.
Currently, I don't think that there's a way to show an accumulative
No.
TRP. Will that be something that might be?
Yes. Yeah. The thing to think about with Operation More is that things are more fluid. Right now we have, standard impressions, a VAI score that doesn't change until we update the populations and the board locations. With Operation More, you'll be able to have a more frequent feed of data, so you'll be able to understand those differences. If you're talking about a rotary campaign in the current system, you kind of have to game the system a little bit.
Yeah, there's ways around it.
It doesn't really do it right. But the name of the game, I think, in that case is let's say you have one board on for a week and the whole thing lasts 4 weeks. If you put all of the locations in the system that are part of this rotary plan, you put 1 week, you begin to understand a little bit about what it can do, but that's as close as you're going to be able to come. Does that help? Okay. Anything else? Great. Thank you all very, very much. And if I had a microphone, I'd drop it because we are done.